When my grandson Noah was 3, we uh, we had gone back. At that time, we were living in Las Vegas, but we'd come back to Southeast Kansas for a vacation visit, and the the little town they lived in is so little it didn't have a municipal pool, and actually it doesn't have much municipal period. But down the road at Altamont, they have a pretty nice little municipal pool. So we all loaded up and went to the pool. And one of the things that we did is I stood in water up to my chest and held my hands out and said, "Come on, Noah, jump in. I'll catch you." Well, it was, I wish I had video of it because when he's, graduating from high school in a couple of years, it'd be really fun to show the video of him dancing around on the side of the pool trying to decide if he's going to jump or not. And then finally he did. And of course, I stepped out of the way and he sank to the bottom. And no, I caught him. And that kind of started this fun little game that we spent most of the afternoon doing. See, here's the thing about trust, or one of the things, and maybe there's a whole bunch of other important things, but I'd say this has got to be one of the most important things about trust, is that you can't execute on trust without taking a risk. And 3-year-old Noah was trying hard as he knew how to decide and convince himself to take the risk. Because when you are in a position to trust, you always have to deal with this little question in the back of your mind that says, but what if? I find that to always be true in terms of my trust for God. And I already shared, I'll probably share it every time, we come to a trust intersection. I don't trust well. I really struggle with trust. And I think in my life, and I've listened to a lot of people's stories who also struggle to trust. And I think one of the common things for all of us is disappointment in our lives. This is not biblical, but it's very, I think, at least informative and interesting. This distrust that has such a profound impact on me today as a 67-year-old adult, I think goes back to my childhood when I had trusted things to happen, people to do, right? And it didn't happen. Well, leaving all of the psychology aside, and instead of me blaming my childhood, I think what I want to do is figure out, how do I reprogram my heart and mind to trust? John writes about trust. Last time I without realizing it, see, I use my smartphone as my Bible these days, and I had inadvertently been reading from the New Living Translation rather than NIV. My normal study version is the New International Version. But anyway, in the New Living Translation, the idea is that we know how much God loves us in the present tense, and we have put our trust in God's love. Well, the NIV says, and so we know and rely on the love God has for us, which is a less, I would say, it takes a little bit of a less stringent approach to the trust issue. where it chooses to use, and this is a legitimate word. It's not like, well, they sure mistranslated that. No, it almost all Greek words have to be somehow interpreted in order to be brought over into English, because we have, this is not true of all Greek words by any means, but it's true of many, many Greek words, in that one Greek word will have 2, 3, 5 possible meanings, and you infer those meanings from context and tone, and a very skilled translator knows how to do these things. And since I'm talking about translation, I'll just mention to you, these days, the versions of the Bible that we have generally are translated by teams and committees, so that one person may say, well, I think this word would work here, and another would say, well, you'll have to convince me because I think this word. So there's dialogue involved in choosing which word goes where and when. Frankly, this is not a new practice. King James, in 1611, when he commissioned his committee to translate what we have as the King James Version of the Bible from the Greek, Arabic, and Hebrew documents that they had, it was by committee. And oh, by the way, so I'm down a bunny trail. I'm going to go just one step further. It is to me most amazing that so little of the 1611 translation has been dramatically revised by newer translations using older extant documents, older manuscripts that have been discovered over time since 1611. To me, one of the things that says is God is really serious about preserving the integrity of his word and making sure it comes down through the ages to all people. Okay, so now back to 1 John chapter 4, verse 16. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. We rely, we trust. And my application for me personally, and maybe for you as well, would be I continue to learn how to rely on God's love. I continue to learn how to trust in God's love. I keep learning, I keep practicing to put my trust in Jesus. In my quiet time this morning, on 2 or 3 different issues that are vexing to me personally, I confess to God, I put my trust in you, because my trust is not going to naturally drift in that direction. If anything, my trust will naturally drift away from trusting in God's sovereignty, his power, his goodness, and toward kind of the chaos that I see around me. Okay, because we've experienced God's love, and because we have chosen a belief system founded on the fact that Jesus came into our world as God's Son, because of that, and because we know intellectually and we have begun to apprehend emotionally that we are deeply loved by God, we rely on God's love. The love God has for us. Okay. And then the 3 words that are, if you want to boil it down to how do you define love, how do you describe love, God, who is God? Here it is. God is love. First of all, does not say love is God, right? God is love and all love is God. God is love. And oh, by the way, you've already probably heard this, read this, know this. This word here, this word that John, I don't ever want to leave out the fact, John didn't just sit around thinking this stuff up. He was inspired by God's Spirit. But John selected a word, and I believe this word was selected intentionally by God, that only appears in Scripture. It's not in other Greek literature. And the word is agape. This is a one-of-a-kind love. This is a kind of love that only God can do, can give, and here can be. If God is love, or since God is love, since this is his central nature, then how in the world do you explain some of the horrible things that happen in the world? I mean, let's just start with nature. It's still, at this point, as advanced as technology and science has become, we are still at the mercy of weather. Horrible things happen all around the world as a result of uncontrollable weather. And people die. There are many instances of thousands of people dying because of weather stuff. And so you're telling me the God who is supposedly supremely in control, the only one who is in control, lets that happen or causes it to happen, and he is love? Boy, there are a lot of people that is one of the strongest sticking points for them on believing in the God of Scripture, a God of love. I can relate, and honestly, I'm not going to be able to give you a full-on, fully orbed, deeply fleshed out reason for believing that God is love even though these bad things happen. And then beyond that, there are bad things happening all the time to good people. What kind of a loving God would permit that? Well, I don't have a great answer to that. My best answer is not even my answer, but comes from, I'll give you two guesses as I have read ideas. This idea comes from my favorite author, C.S. Lewis. If God didn't permit evil in the world, he would not be able to permit us to have free will. And this is a subject that could be debated, discussed, nearly infinitely. If you are very interested in this idea, this concept, I'm going to refer you to two C.S. Lewis books. One is Mere Christianity, where he offers a fair introduction to this idea. And the second, which I have to warn you, this will take you in deep, deep waters, is The Problem of Pain. Lewis does as good a job as anybody I've ever come across in addressing this issue. But, well, I've already burned up my time and haven't done much at all with the concept that since God is love, there ought to be some then on the other side of it. And there is. But we won't get to that until we come back next time on the Soul Care with Stevie Boy.